Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing from topics from across the world. The United Kingdom's policy changes under Prime Minister Keir Starmer have a significant impact on global politics. So, what is Keir Starmer's approach to China? Is he effectively addressing the UK's economic challenges? Could Trump's tariff policies harm the UK? What role should the UK play in the Middle East and the Russia-Ukraine war? Let's find out. Joining us is Iszatt, a British journalist, criminologist and presenter with a diverse career spanning multiple disciplines. She has reported for prominent news organisations including the BBC and ITV, covering a wide range of topics from crime and forensics to technology and economics. Thank you for joining us, Iszatt. My first question to you is, do you think the assassination of the Russian chemical weapons chief, allowing Ukraine to use US long-range missiles, will lead to further escalation of the war?
Well, we've already seen today that there has been an escalation. There's been phosphorus gas that has been raining down in Ukraine, and also, Russia is saying that it will fight back, and it has been by pushing further into Ukraine itself. So I feel at the moment that there is this ongoing battle that has escalated quite quickly over the last few weeks, and sadly I think it is looking like it is going to be getting worse on both sides.
Do you think the Biden administration is provoking Russia to retaliate, making it more difficult for Trump to negotiate peace when he comes to power?
Well, the interesting outgoing President Biden and obviously Trump president-elect coming in, we do know that Biden has offered more money to Ukraine. They have given them a big loan to help with the weapons. And this is quite a frustration, I guess, for the Kremlin and for Vladimir Putin. There was a discussion between him and his Security Council that there was going to possibly be talks about starting some peace. Trump was very pushy on this matter. He said as soon as he was going to become president that he would be fighting for peace and that he was going to get everyone around a table and negotiations would start. Even Zelensky said that he was open to some kind of conversation. Now, as Biden is on his way out, giving more money to Ukraine, there seems to be this turmoil within the country itself that Ukraine and Zelensky are worried that as soon as Trump comes in, that they're going to be losing ground, they're going to be losing support, they're going to be losing money. So this does feel like it's quite a push for them to quickly do all of its escalation, get out there, get fighting before potentially having all of their money and weapons stripped. So the escalation here is not necessarily that Biden is trying to leave a legacy or trying to show that he was this commander of a war in a foreign country per se, but it clearly is him giving this money while Trump is saying that the money won't be there from January onwards. There has brought this tension towards both Ukraine and the Kremlin, and that's potentially why things have escalated as quickly and as fast as they are now, and potentially it's going to continue all the way until January. And the only thing Trump can do when he comes in is to start that negotiation process. Where they might be in the terms of fighting, then we can only speculate. But what Trump still has on his side is the potential for NATO membership that could help put Ukraine into NATO, parts of Ukraine into NATO, which would help Zelensky, and therefore could potentially stop Russia expanding further. But of course, these are all possibilities. And at the moment, today, we are still seeing this fighting on the ground, and we are seeing that escalation happen. So that's something that is slightly concerning going forward. And that may have been pushed by the fact that Biden is leaving and he has given all of this billions of pounds.
How do you view the UK's China policy under Starmer?
China and the UK have had an odd relationship for many, many years. There has been a push to try and bring China as more of a confidant, and that's what seems to be that Sir Keir Starmer is trying to do. He's trying to open communication with China and trying to get them on side and become a friend. And this isn't necessarily what the public are looking to do. We had not long ago this week the spy that was, his name was given out in courts, and he has been accused of spying. He has been banned from the UK, and he had his fingers in a lot of pies. Now, he said he isn't a spy and he has done nothing wrong, but it does go to show that there are a number of people who the UK see as a threat, who are from China, and that they are within the government, and they are potentially having their fingers in the pies. They are having their voices heard. And the fact that Starmer hasn't come out and said, we are looking into these threats, we are looking to see what their concerns are and how far and wide-reaching this is. He hasn't done that. It's worrying a lot of people that when he is more settled in his role as Prime Minister, that he is going to open a lot more doors to and make potentially another golden age of China that we had when David Cameron was in charge, which unfortunately led to a lot of London stock going to Chinese assets. We don't really have a full understanding of Keir Starmer's China policy as we're moving forward, now that a lot of information is coming out about the workings of the government. It's not just Prince Andrew, and it's not just Conservative prime ministers that have had their ears turned by potential Chinese spies. There are also a lot of Labour MPs as well, and others too. So the China policy going forward needs to be a bit more aggressive, I think, than what Keir Starmer is willing to talk about at the moment. And it would be interesting to see when he comes back from his journeys abroad, which he seems to be on at the moment, to actually face this question and face the challenge of how are we going to move forward when there are so many policies that need to be addressed. And he needs to do that rather than trying to deflect from the question.
In your view, how is Starmer faring as PM in boosting the UK's flailing economy?
Keir Starmer and Labour said that they were going to be pushing for the growth of the economy in the UK. That was one of the milestones that he said that he wanted to achieve. So far, there doesn't seem to be so much of a push. We had the budget in October, which showed, our business confidence was at its lowest point after that. There's tax rises. They said that they were going to be borrowing £70 billion, which is more than the previous government. They claim that there's a financial black hole out there. And that seems to be their excuse for a lot of problems at the moment. The economy itself, it has been faltering for a while. We haven't seen a huge expanse of growth. There was a talk about potentially a 2% growth in the economy by 2025. And now that is unlikely. It's quite optimistic. In fact, at the moment, what we are seeing is Starmer giving a lot more money away. How to grow an economy is to get people to spend money. Consumers need to spend money, but we're not getting the extra money in our wages. The rents aren't coming down. There's a lot of concern with benefits problems out there, that we have a lot of people on benefits not going into work situation. Keir Starmer has given money to foreign aid, Ukraine, Syria, and the money that he is giving to try and boost industries are going to the bigger companies, aviation, nuclear. This kind of growth is one that will, yes, get some working jobs in, but it isn't going to be getting to the heart of the issue when it comes to the economy. People need money, and they need money in their pockets to spend the money to get that economy moving again. Building houses on places like Greenland, which seems to be quite a push for Labour, is going to be a small push forward, but then that takes the fact that the environment is going to be a problem. So when it comes to looking at the growth of the economy as a whole, at the moment there seems to be quite a few flawed policies, and the budget itself increasing taxes, getting rid of some of the inheritance taxes that we saw farmers protesting in the streets. All of these are making the people concerned about the government, concerned that they're not looking out for the actual industries that are homegrown and looking further afield. When we talk about aviation and nuclear, many of those are from foreign countries, and giving money to those kind of industries isn't necessarily going to be getting jobs for the UK people. The idea of getting people off benefits and back into work, those are things that need to be a focus. Mental health issues, all of those things, and growing the economy it seems working with Saudi Arabia, working with China, are short term, but looking at the longer term picture, there is a concern that where is the UK pushing itself? Is it going to be a partner to these people, or is it going to be undermined by what they are pushing? And it doesn't feel necessarily that these milestones are necessarily going to be achieved even in the next 4 years, which Labour are part of. They're trying to break down.
Do you think Trump's tariff policy it could hurt the UK?
Well, Trump's US tariff policy isn't likely to hit the UK as a whole, because ultimately the US UK, the way that the imports and exports work, it's mostly on services rather than goods, and the tariff policy is based on goods. So it's unlikely that those services will be affected by the new tariff rules that are going to come in. But what is going to be an impact is that those tariffs that Trump is talking about imposing will affect the EU, and the EU to the UK. Obviously, our imports and exports are very close knit. So if that's going to be a 10-20% increase for the EU, that is going to impact the UK, because those prices we'll see in our supermarkets, we'll see it on our goods too. So even though I think it's directly, it's unlikely to have much of a significant impact. Indirectly, yes, we're going to be seeing it. Cost of living is already quite high, so having anything else that's going to be giving that extra cost is going to be felt, and it's going to be seen. We're already seeing like inflation increase, fuel costs increase. We as a country, our import exports are quite, we get a lot of products and a lot of goods in, so that's going to be where we're going to see it the most, especially when it comes to considering fuel and food going forward. But the idea that Trump is putting forward with these tariffs is something that I think that a lot of countries will be reacting to, and it may well be that everyone will have to face the consequences of where are the costs coming from? How are we going to be breaking down? Because ultimately, people can't be affording £1.50 or more, £5 for a loaf of bread if it's come from Spain. And maybe it will change the way that the economic growth within the UK looks at how they process and how they actually start making their own food, potentially.
What are the UK-US ties looking like under Starmer and Trump?
Well, at the moment, there does seem to be a lot of butting heads. Trump and Starmer are very different people and very different thought processes and mentalities of going forward. When Trump was on his election campaign, Keir Starmer wasn't as quite polite, potentially, as he should have been. Also, a lot of the MPs, David Lammy was one who is now in charge of our foreign policies. He was also not very forthcoming about potentially Donald Trump getting in as president. So there's already this tension that was building ahead of the US elections. When Donald Trump then got voted in, huge votes by the country, again, Labour wasn't quite as congratulatory as they potentially should have been, or at least taken a step back to realise that this is how the ties will be going forward. You need to be making friends, you need to be building those ties. The US and UK relationship is a strange one, and they need each other to help moving forward. The UK does need a lot of its relationships. As I said before, we are a small island, a small country, and we do need those relationships, the Indo-Pacific relationships, the US relationships, EU, all of them. So to already start off on the back foot when Trump's campaign was going ahead, it's not very clever, and it is a concern moving forward. Trump is known to have a long memory and can be a little bit petty. So hopefully that won't be the case going forward. But also, Starmer isn't as popular within the UK either. So he doesn't feel that he really wants to be pushing this and strengthening this relationship with the US. He seems to be going elsewhere. He's very keen to go back into the EU, which there's a worry that he will undo Brexit, and that seems to be his focus. But he does really need to be working with the US. There seems to be a lot of change at the moment when it comes to liberals, right wing. A lot of people are very frustrated with the politics in their own country. And Starmer does seem that he's not quite on board with the way that the people are thinking and feeling. And they seem to be looking to Trump and looking to his policies and agreeing with him in the UK. And that isn't going to be working if Starmer is going to keep pushing EU policies, which, that's the reason why most people, well, a percentage of people voted for Brexit. So I think Starmer needs to take a step back and really have a think about how it's going to work between the US and the UK, because that needs to be strengthened, that relationship, and quickly.
How do you view the situation in the Middle East? Do you think Assad's overthrow will revive ISIS?
I think the problem in Syria with Assad being removed is that there isn't one faction that is really going to be standing out. Syria is broken up into a whole host of defectors. And there was a moment a couple of weeks ago when they all came together and they pushed through and they took over Damascus and they declared themselves in charge. And obviously we have a main faction within that who has one of their leaders is potentially a former ISIS. But I think the concern isn't that ISIS are going to be back in charge or in charge. There's concern that there's going to be a civil war on the streets. Now that they've all worked together, your enemy is my enemy, let's go and topple Damascus and take over. What's next? All of those factions are going to want to have their say. They're going to want to be in charge. So I don't think that we're going to be seeing at the moment any kind of peace for a short while. I think those kind of factions are going to be starting to aggravate each other. They're going to potentially fight and get more fighting going on across the whole of Syria. And then is it likely that there's going to be someone that's going to be taking over? Yes. What would that person be? What would that group be? Possibly, again, it may well be a dictatorial type of leadership there, because of all of this breakdown within the Middle East and within Syria itself. It's when one huge party gets in charge, there's going to also always be people who are unhappy and groups that are unhappy. It's just a wait and see, really. At the moment, everyone's still elevated. They're still happy that they've managed to get Assad's regime out, and they are still feeling that buzz. But there is going to be a time when those other factions that had come together to force him out and the regime out are going to be asking, well, where's their piece of the pie?
What role must the UK play in ending terrorism in the Middle East?
I'm not sure that the UK can necessarily end terrorism in the Middle East. I think the UK doesn't quite understand how it works within its own country, and the extremists that we have here, and why people do turn to terrorism and religious factors. They can only offer aid, and that's what Keir Starmer has been doing. He has given quite a bit of money to aid in Syria in the last couple of days to ensure that the people there are getting the support that they need. But sadly, when it comes to any kind of dictatorship, there are already people who are angry and they want to be fighting back. And that's where fanaticism and that's where extremism is already seeped in. What can Britain do about that? Not too much, I'll be honest. And I don't really see how they can go in and even push for that. We're just seen as white saviors, in a sense, going in and saying, this is how you should run your country. That's not the way to do it, because then that's going to make the UK seem that they are stepping on toes, and that's a worry itself. I think all Britain can do is try and be a support, whether or not that works either within the countries themselves. it's been years and years.
Taiwan and other Asian nations are under constant Chinese threat. How do you think the UK should tackle Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, the UK does need to step up and be more aggressive towards China. We do need to figure out how we're going to work with the Indo-Pacific areas. That we need to talk about tariffs, we need to talk about importing, exporting, but we need to ensure that we're talking about how it works best for Britain, how it best works for these countries to get on the same path. When China gets involved, UK seems to step back a bit and allow this friendly relationship, which they think is friendly, to have it say, well, it shouldn't. It should be more aggressive. And that is what the US plans to do. That's what Trump said he's going to be doing. He's going to be having a fine line between what the US believes should be moving forward with their tariff system and not looking to China to see if they're okay with it. I think for too long, the UK has allowed all of this aggression to happen on places that, if they're not fighting, then we shouldn't get involved. Well, actually, if you want to work with the country and you want to ensure that there isn't going to be absolute aggression from China across different areas, then I do feel like it's time that the UK changes their policies and puts these countries and itself first. And that's something that needs to be considered, because it does seem that the West has for too long just allowed this infiltration of China and look to them to see if they're doing okay. And it's time to actually look out for the people that do need it and be a bit more aggressive from that stance.
Thank you, Alex Iszatt, for speaking to us on Focal Length. With that, it's a wrap on this episode. For more international news updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.